Well, hey, good morning, everybody. So glad that you're joining us for online church. As you can see, we're doing things a little bit different this Sunday, much like we did during the quarantine time. And the reason for that is we've had a bit of an issue over these past several weeks trying to make sure our online services were dialed in. And the best way for us to do that, moving forward, at least short term, is by pre-recording the sermon and then posting it live. And so nonetheless, I'm really glad that you're joining us today. Before we jump into the message, I do have a few announcements that I want to share with you, 3 in particular. The first one is that this Sunday, August 23rd, we will have Kids Zone as well as toddler and nursery during our 10:30 service. And so if you're watching this, maybe you're out of town or whatever, and you're wondering when is kids stuff going to start back, it starts back as you're watching this today. And during the 10:30 service, all of our volunteers will have masks, and it gets kids, out of the adult environment. And they're still welcome to attend with you as a family if that's what you want. But I will strongly encourage you to have them go to their kid-friendly environment, because you may want them in here with you, but they definitely want to be in there because they don't like to listen to me. I know that from my own kids. So be aware that moving forward during the 10:30 service, we'll have kids' opportunities. Also, we want you to know that next Sunday night, that's September 30th at 6 p.m., we are going to be launching a masked-only service. One of the things that we've been hearing from several of our members is that they would be willing to come with social distancing and if everybody wears a mask. Well, our 9 and our 10:30 services, we encourage you to wear a mask, but we don't force anybody to, and we're not going to turn anybody away. Well, that kind of alienates a certain segment of our population, and even those that would consider themselves vulnerable or are afraid of catching COVID or whatever. And so we're going to launch a brand new Sunday night Bible study. There will be no worship or anything like that. It'll just be basically me teaching the Sunday morning sermon again. And we're asking that every single person that attends that service to have a mask. Now, if that works better with your schedule, or you're like, man, I'd rather go to that as opposed to the Sunday morning are mask optional, but Sunday night, we're asking that everybody wear a mask. And so if you've been kind of on the fence, or you've been not willing to come, or you've been worried about that, Sunday night is a great option for you and a great service opportunity for you as well. So August 30th, we will be launching that opportunity. And then finally, in September, we're going to do what we're going to call a month of prayer. So for the 30 days in September, every single day, we're going to release a short little devotional with a Bible passage as well as a specific prayer topic, and we're going to make that available on our website, online. And we want to encourage everybody in our church as well as in our community to pray each and every day for things like our nation, for our schools, for our church, for the lost. We're just going to pray over different areas of our lives, our community, our nation, and ask that God move in a big way. And so we're going to ask that you partner with us and pray with us, and we get to sit back then and see what God is going to do. So those are the 3 announcements that I wanted to share with you before we jump into the message. But today, we're going to continue our series that we're calling Paradox, Truth in Contradictions. And I want to start our sermon today by talking about the way that kids think of adults and the way that your perception of adults change when you actually become an adult. You see, when I was a kid, I thought, I can't wait until I get to be grown up, because then I get to have a job and I get to make money and I can spend my money however I want, and I'll get to drive a car. And I always thought also about clothing and shoes, golf clubs. My parents weren't willing to buy me expensive shoes or golf clubs or whatever when I was little, because I was in the midst of growing. And so, these shoes that fit you now, 3 months from now, probably aren't going to. So we're not going to spend $90 on a pair of shoes when your foot's still growing as rapidly as it is. But I thought, man, when I become an adult, I get to do and have all of this stuff. And I just thought of the freedoms and all of the benefits and the privileges that come with being an adult. But as a kid, you don't think of the responsibilities and the burdens that come as well. You see, as an adult, you can spend your money however you want, But if you run out of money and you can't pay your bills, there are going to be consequences for that. And when you're an adult, yeah, you can buy expensive golf clubs and expensive shoes or whatever, but like, I've not spent $90 on a pair of shoes and I don't know how long. And yeah, you get to have a car and you get to have a job, but once again, that all comes with these burdens and these responsibilities. And you think of it like as a parent, you could spend your money on whatever you want, but you do whatever you can to provide for your kids and take care of them first and foremost. Like as a kid, you don't see all of that. And as a kid, you don't recognize the burden and responsibility that is placed on adults. It's like you have a grandiose romantic view of what adulthood is going to be like or what it's going to look like, and the reality is a much different picture. Well, as we continue our series today, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 20, verses 20 through 28. If you've got a Bible, I encourage you to go ahead and turn there. But the apostles seem to have a misunderstanding as to what it looks like to be a leader or to be great. In their minds, they think of leadership and greatness as privileges, as getting to boss people around, as being important, as everybody looking at you. And what Jesus is going to do is he's going to flip it. He's going to say, look, you think of the rights that leaders have and all of the accolades and the privileges, but Jesus says if you want to be great, it isn't about any of that. It's actually about emptying yourself and becoming less and taking on more responsibility as opposed to reaching and grabbing more rights. So Matthew chapter 20, hopefully you've got your Bible open. Here's how the text begins. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favor of him, which you got to admit is kind of weak sauce. Like to have mom come and ask Jesus for a favor with you. Now the apostles, just in terms of age and everything, we tend to think that they were all grown men, they all had full beards and all this stuff. Peter was probably the oldest apostle. He may have been in his early 20s. We do know that he was married because Jesus healed his mother-in-law, but we don't know really anything about his kids in terms of the biblical record. They also summarize that John was probably like pre-teen age, but all the other apostles were probably teenagers. And so it would be like, your mom coming to high school with you and asking your teacher of something, and so that she's like, we want to ask a favor, and Jesus says, what is it that you want? And she said, grant that one of these sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. So now mom has shown up at the varsity basketball practice, and she says, Coach, I have a favor to ask. I would like for each of my sons to be a captain on your team. What would you do if you were one of the other players watching this scene unfold? But she's asking for a much bigger thing than just being a captain of a basketball team. She's asking that her sons be given the two prime positions when Jesus starts his reign and when his kingdom comes to full consummation. They're asking to be like number 2 and number 3, like, Speaker of the House and the Vice President. Like, this is what they are asking for, and this is the demand, essentially, that they're making of Jesus. Verse 22, Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup I am going to drink? Now, drinking of a cup, all throughout the Old Testament, Psalms in particular, is just kind of a symbolic way of saying embracing your destiny. So Jesus says, can you embrace the same destiny that I'm going to have to embrace? It may come with blessings, it may come with curses, and I think that they hear Jesus asking, are you willing to fight for me to bring about this kingdom? Are you willing to fight against the Romans and to go on a conquest? Are you two ready to be generals in my army? I think that's what they're asking, and their response to that is just simply, yeah, we can. It's like a job interview when your boss asks, so are you familiar with Photoshop and Excel and Quicken and all these different programs, and you're just trying to get a job, so you're like, I'm just going to say yes to all these questions no matter what so that I can make myself look good. So they're like, yeah, we can handle all of that, Jesus. They have no idea what they're saying yes, we can to. But here's what Jesus says to them. He says, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. So yeah, actually you are going to have kind of the same destiny or the same path that I'm going to have, one that like leads to suffering and ultimately death, but it isn't my right to give you the number 2 and number 3 positions. My Father is going to be the one to designate who sits in my who sits in my right and who sits in my left. And then verse 24 says that when the 10, which is the other apostles, when they hear about this, they were indignant with the 2 brothers. They were frustrated by not only the mother's request, but that the brothers went along with it. And they're frustrated that these 2 guys tried to elevate themselves and leapfrog all the other apostles. It's like, how dare you make this request of Jesus and say that essentially you're better than the rest of us whenever you make this request, and ultimately in a passive-aggressive way, you're making a claim that you're the number 1 and 2 in terms of the apostles. So they were bothered by it. It says they were indignant, and they were probably off in the corner whispering and debating with one another as to, who's the greatest and who would really be at the right and left as far as Jesus is concerned, and who the Father would choose to be in these prime positions. And Jesus can see all of this unfolding. He knows how this story ends, so he gathers them together for a coachable moment. And he says to them, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. So you know what it is to be a boss, because you see the way the Gentiles treat their leaders or their bosses, their governors, even Caesar at the very top. They lord over people, which is to say they snap their fingers and they make demands, and people jump to attention when they walk into the room. You know how they lead. You see it happen on a day-to-day basis, and I think you think that this is what true leadership and true greatness looks like. And so in verse 26, he says, not so with you. They lead this way. That's not how you're going to lead. He says, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. That whoever wants to be great must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first or in prime position, like you want to sit at my right and my left, you want to be at the front, that means you have to be the biggest servant of them all. You have to empty yourself and think of others before you think of yourself. Well, in their minds, this is the total opposite of what true leadership looks like. Because leadership is about authority. It's about commanding. It's about accumulating things. It's about being able to boss people around. Like in their minds, that's what leadership is. And Jesus says, I know that's what you think leadership is, because that's how you see leadership run all throughout the entire world. But if you want to be a great leader, you want to be great, you want to talk about sitting at my right and at my left, it's not about bossing and making the best decisions and all this stuff. It's about you saying, I'm going to serve God first and foremost, I'm going to love my neighbor as myself, and I'm going to put my own wants, desires, and wishes third on that depth chart. I'm going to focus on God first, others second, and myself third. Jesus says that if you want to be truly great in the eyes of the Father, that you must be a servant and a slave to all. Well, this isn't something that we want to see. And in their minds, you want to talk about a paradox, a seemingly contradictory statement. This is like one of those that when Jesus says it, all of his apostles would have been sitting there scratching their head like, what in the world is he talking about? And some of them probably thought, I don't think I want to be great in the way that Jesus defines greatness. Now, for them, think about how this plays out in their lives. As they all become major leaders in the Christian movement, they're traveling around. I mean, I think of the Apostle Paul in particular. Of course, he's not here in this conversation. We used him as an example last week. He just traveled all throughout the Roman Empire. He's planting churches. He's working his tail off. Like he is totally emptying himself, not so that people can look at him and make his name great or to see his name up in lights, so to speak, but to make the name of Jesus great, to do his best to serve and honor his Lord and serve and honor the people that God has entrusted to his care. And even the apostles who were here for this very first conversation, they become leaders in different churches and leaders in terms of the movement. But they all die for their faith because they recognize that service and servitude and being a slave to others is the life that God has called us to live. That we take care of the needs of others and look to the needs of others before we would do so for ourselves. Now, as we think about our lives today and how this plays out and what it looks like, we start to kind of, I think, balk at the idea that this is applicable in the 21st century. I mean, think about the ramifications of this. Like if you're a parent, how does this play out in the way that you parent? If you're like, well, am I supposed to serve my kids? Am I supposed to be their slave? I mean, Jesus says that if you want to be great, you have to be a slave to everyone. Am I supposed to be a slave to my kids? And obviously, that's an oversimplification of what Jesus is talking about here. Or what about if you're a school teacher? And if your job is to serve your kids, are you then supposed to be at their beck and call and do whatever it is that they want, and you make an assignment and they're like, I don't want to do the assignment. Well, you know what? I'm here to serve you, so I won't give you the assignment because that's not what you want. Now, once again, I think that's an oversimplification. I think you start to play this out, like what does it look like to be a boss and apply this principle? And here's why, like to boil it down and maybe in danger of oversimplifying it, here's what I think we do. We do our best to meet the true needs of others, even if we have to empty ourselves in some way. So you think about being a parent. And in a lot of ways, being a parent is exhausting because you feel this burden and responsibility to raise this child up until they're 18 years old with good morals and a solid work ethic, and that they're respectful and that they love the Lord. I mean, you have these different goals as a parent, and you think, okay, this is what I'm going to kind of set my kid up for success. This is how I'm going to do it. And you think about the way that looks and the way that you serve and the way that you empty yourself. I think a lot of times we as parents, and just to use parenting as an example, because I think it's one that we can relate to, you know, in a broader sense. When I think about being a parent and serving our kids, I do not mean that we do our best to help our kids to be successful in the world's definition of success. And I see a lot of parents, and I'm not trying to be overly critical here, I'm trying to maintain this balance. I see a lot of parents who will move heaven and earth to make sure their kids have, you know, a certain type of shoe, or that they're playing on a certain type of team, or that they get to swing a $300 bat when they're in the batter's box. I mean, like, we will do all these things and we think, I'm serving my kid. And I think what we might be doing a lot of times is spoiling our kids to the point of creating an entitlement where they're not appreciative of all they've been given. They've never had to work for what they've been given. And we think we're serving our kids, and what we're actually doing is weakening kind of their intestinal fortitude and work ethic and all this stuff. Like, we're weakening them and then sending them into the world ready for them just to get knocked down and beat up, because not everybody is there for all their whims and to be at their beck and call and to just give them and hand them things. Like, I think true service is, I'm going to do what you need me to do, even if you don't want me to do it, or you don't want me to do it in that way. Like, there have been very few times in my life where I got a homework assignment that I said, you know what, thank you for giving me this assignment, that I could spend, you know, a couple of hours trying to figure out these trig proofs or whatever it is. Like, I never once went up to a teacher and said, thank you for giving me these assignments, even though it's really what was best for me. Like, the teacher, when she gives assignments, or when he gives assignments, they have authority, they're exercising their authority, but they're doing what is best for the student first and foremost. That's what true service and true leadership actually looks like. That you do the thing that no one else wants to do in order to see the success or to see benefits in the lives of the people that you serve. And so there are all different types of ways that this plays out, and it's never taking the easy road, but always, in our culture today, the road less traveled and the road more difficult. But if you want to truly embody the life that Jesus is calling us to live, and you truly want to be great in the eyes of our Father, like, look away from things like fame and fortune and rights rather, like being able to boss people around. Now, great people may have those things. They may have great wealth, they may have great fame, whatever. Like, you can have those things and still be great in God's eyes. But the definition is not having those things, even though that's where we define greatness. But being willing to empty yourself and use your time, energy, and resources to be a benefit and a blessing to others. Thinking of God first and bringing glory and honor to His name, first and foremost, and then serving your neighbor as often as you possibly can. And so, as you think about greatness, and you think about, well, who's been a great influencer on your life, and you think about the greatest people in our world or our country, those are probably two different lists. And what I mean by that is, if you were to make a list of, well, who are the greatest people on the planet right now? And you might list people that are well-known nationally or well-known in terms of the world political realm, whatever it is. Like you're going to name names or put names like these are the greatest people on planet Earth. But then when you put the people who have had the greatest impact on you, the greatest influence on you, and you were to take that list to Washington, D.C., and you were called to testify before Congress, like these are the greatest people in my life that have an impact on me, you would read a list of names that they would probably never have heard of. And what Jesus is saying is, be a part of somebody's list. Like, don't think, I want to be great in the eyes of the world and then not have a direct impact on the lives of the people around me. Greatness is when you have that great impact and you look for opportunities to serve and empty yourself to elevate somebody else and help them to achieve who it is or what it is that God has called them to be or called them to do. So that's my challenge to you, to become great. Look at the people around you and look at ways that you can serve them in big and mighty ways. Once again, I'm glad that you joined us for our message today, and I hope that you're able to join us maybe next weekend as we worship in person Sunday night at 6 with a masked-only service. Thanks for watching.